Hey students, this is Mr. Stansel, and I hope you are as excited as I am to begin our year of exploring the social science of psychology. Now, as we have discussed, we will be starting our journey with the study of the social psychology perspective. There are several reasons why we begin with social psychology. The first is simply because it is one of the more interesting units we will cover, so it is a great way to start the year. Second, we will get to investigate some basic psychological principles in real-world application. Third, many social psych principles will be incorporated into later units. And fourth, because a major component of the AP Psychology exam. So let's begin. What is social psychology? And who in the world is that guy? As we discussed on the first day of school, psychology is the scientific study of mental processes and behaviors. Keeping with that principle, social psychology is the scientific investigation of how the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of individuals are influenced by the actual or imagined or implied presence of others. So what that means is that our thoughts, our feelings, even our emotions, and how we behave and act towards others can be influenced not only by the actual presence, but also by the imagined presence of others. So, during this section, we are going to read and highlight origins and history of social psychology, major assumptions made by individuals and groups that impact social interactions, methods of investigating psychological concepts, social psychology's contributions to society, as well as the study of psychology itself, and strengths and weaknesses of social psychology principles. While the study of the mind and human behavior has been a continuing investigation for thousands of years, in only the previous 100 years has it developed into true scientific inquiry. Consider the previous centuries in Europe. It was believed that the supernatural guided our decisions and behaviors. For example, if one was to suffer from schizophrenia in the 1300s, they would in all likelihood be perceived as being possessed by a demon, and as a result would probably be locked in a dungeon and tortured as a form of treatment. However, China, around 6th century AD, is credited with the earliest psychological exams. It involved drawing a circle with one hand while drawing a square with another. Medieval Muslim physicians were among the first to develop treatments that we today would call cognitive therapy. However, there was never a scientific standard for the investigation of our mental processes and behaviors, at least not until Wilhelm Wundt, William James, and Sigmund Freud began the process in the late 1800s. We will discuss those individuals in more detail in the next unit, but under their influence, Kurt Lewin, who's pictured here and who was pictured earlier, would be the first psychologist to use scientific principles to suggest that our behaviors are shaped not only by our internal disposition or personality, but also by the environment and situation in which we are in. Kurt Lewin, like many early psychologists, was a Gestalt psychologist, which we will explore further in Unit 7, Sensations and Perceptions. After being injured in World War I, fighting for the Germans, he returned to the University of Berlin to finish his dissertation. As a German Jew, Lewin immigrated to the United States when the Nazis took over Germany, and once there, he developed an interest in group dynamics. Lewin's interest in group dynamics was geared specifically towards leadership styles. Because of the contrasting political ideologies of the day, like laissez-faire economics, authoritarian dictatorship, and democracy, Lewin sought to discover which leadership style was in fact the most effective and most efficient for society. To answer the question of which political system is more efficient, Lewin developed an experiment. In this experiment, Lewin organized a group of boys into 3 groups. Each group was tasked with building birdhouses. 2 groups had a leader who was Kurt Lewin, and the 3rd group had no adult supervision. This was part of each group experiencing different leadership styles. In the authoritarian group, the boys were assigned specific tasks in the building of the birdhouse. For example, one boy would cut the wood, another would nail the pieces together, and another would sand the wood, and so on and so forth. The boys were even given specific instructions on how to carry out their respective tasks. They were then heavily monitored by the authoritarian, Kurt Lewin. The boys in this group were not allowed to deviate from their assignments, and any complaints or dissension to the leader would be punished. In the Democratic group, the boys had the opportunity to vote on who got to perform that task, and if they wanted to change tasks, they could. Using the Democratic approach, the boys had more of a say in the production of their birdhouse. In the laissez-faire group, there was no leader, and the boys were left to figure everything out on their own, like who would be responsible for each step of birdhouse production. Which group do you think had the most efficient leadership style? Or in other words, which group was able to produce the most birdhouses and at the highest quality? You might be shocked to find that the most efficient group was the authoritarian/dictatorship group. However, that is only true if the leader is present and can maintain constant and strict surveillance of his workers. In the real world, it is impossible for the government to keep an eye on every single thing that every individual is doing. So which leadership style is the most efficient without the presence of an all-watching, all-powerful leader? That's right. The most efficient system without the presence of an all-powerful, all-seeing leader is the democratic system. And this seems to make sense, because in a democracy, the boys, or people, would have a vested interest in the outcome of production. They would each have a say in each process of production. So this gave the boys more independence, it gave them more responsibility, and as a result, they felt more in charge of the production of their birdhouse. So they took pride in their work. So this did show that the democratic system was the more efficient leadership style. Do you agree or disagree? I guess we'll discuss in class. Well, this concludes our first flipped lesson of Unit 1.1, the Intro to Social Psychology. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.